Bill, the timing and the optics of this are pretty disastrous for the BBC, are they not? In the middle of a pandemic, with many pensioners reliant on their television set for company and contact with the outside world.
Yes, and this was an agreement that they reneged on.
Yeah.
The deal between I heard you just talking now about general taxation, but the BBC licence is pretty much a tax, even if it's called a licence fee. And I think it would be a mistake to politicise it more than it already is, because actually, for the sake of news and things, we want as little political interference in our media as possible.
Yeah.
However, I couldn't agree more that this couldn't be a worse moment to renege on such a significant promise for such a group of people who probably are the BBC's biggest fans anyway.
Well, it sticks in the craw. Bill, absolutely. It sticks in the craw, doesn't it, to hear from BBC management that they can't accommodate this reduced budget without removing the entirety of, for example, BBC Two, given that so many of their big name stars are on millions of pounds, six-figure salaries. Extraordinary,
isn't it? I think the amount paid to Gary Lineker, who I think is tremendous,
sure,
would cover 11,000 over 75-year-old licence fee payers' money. So that's where it's going. But the BBC, for me, is part of our national identity, and I would like to see it given back to the licence fee payers. So if you're over 75 and you've been forced to pay for a licence fee, you should effectively become a shareholder in the BBC. And if it does well, you should benefit. And if it doesn't, then you should be in a position to vote to remove the management team. And I would like to see it not privatised, because that would suggest you bought it, but actually given back to the people who fund it.
I think that sounds like a very creative idea. It definitely needs to be reinvented. Of course, it's a venerated institution. I think you'll agree with me that it in many ways reflects the best of this country. The soft power of a platform like the BBC World Service is fantastic internationally. And it is good that you have creatives who are able to make dramas and comedies without having to chase ratings.
Well, I think there's one other side, which is that they do criticise us as a country too, and I think they could do a much better job at being patriotic and sticking up for Britain in the world. So I'm not as generous, perhaps, in my views as you on that, but certainly there's room for improvement.
Well, of course, I wonder whether some of the tension around the BBC's demands that the over 75s pay up from our audience will come from the fact that many of our listeners here at Talk Radio don't feel represented by the BBC anymore. And surely the clue is in the name, British Broadcasting Corporation. Sometimes it feels like the North London Broadcasting Corporation.
Yes, Islington or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
I quite agree. I certainly used to watch Countryfile and feel that as a farmer it was very helpful. More than just the weather forecast. Adam Henson and people like that were tremendous. Now it's more about urbanites looking at the countryside through rose-rimmed spectacles. It's really a great shame that the BBC seems to have lost its way quite so badly.
Indeed, and I wonder whether, given the fact that the majority of people in this country whose opinions were sought out during the Brexit referendum voted to leave, but if you watched BBC TV, you wouldn't realise that was the case, would you?
No, and I think they got it wrong on COVID as well. And on it was terrible for people who were stuck in Spain, and we were all suffering. And they just seem to see it as an opportunity to criticise the government, who, quite honestly, none of us have ever seen anything like this before. And they're doing their best. I think they're doing a very good job. But I think that you wouldn't know it if you watch the BBC. And it's such a shame, because it should be such a good thing.
Indeed, I would just feel that the BBC has forgotten about impartiality and that it's there to serve the entirety of the nation and therefore reflect a diversity of views. And it's difficult to do that when a broadcaster like the BBC's eye roller in chief, Emily Maitlis, performs political soliloquies at the start of Newsnight.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that that is why independent radio stations are outperforming the BBC, and that's why my youngsters are all watching Netflix, and that's why people are moving away. It doesn't just need to reflect diversity of opinion, it needs to reflect the majority of opinion too, and it singularly fails to do that.
In that spirit, Bill, offering a counter-argument, fans of the BBC as it currently is, and perhaps some of those within the organisation, might say the Conservative Party just has a cultural problem with the BBC. Tories just have it in for the Beeb. What do you say to that?
Well, I know Laura Kuenssberg had to have bodyguards at the Labour Party conference, so I don't think that's true. And I think that the BBC judge bias by saying, well, if both sides complain, we must be getting it right. My view on bias is that neither side should complain if you're getting it right. And they take this rather contrary view, and that's why I don't think it's a left or right problem. I think it's about majority opinion not being reflected. And I think the majority opinion would say people over 75 shouldn't have to pay for their licence.
Indeed. Going forward, because, of course, the licence fee, will remain in place for many years to come, do you think ultimately, and you hinted at it in an earlier answer, that the platform, the protocol by which the BBC is paid for changes? Or do you think the very existence of the BBC has a question mark hanging over it?
Well, I think when you look at how far the BBC's tentacles reach, it is a phenomenal organisation. It has internet influence. It influences children, youngsters. It provides news. It provides all manner of public services and also international services. So I think that losing it altogether would be a mistake. But I think making it more accountable to the British people who pay for it would be a wonderful step in the right direction. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No.
People who love the BBC have every right to continue to enjoy it. But I would like to see that they had more of a say in what it delivered. And at the moment, they're just faceless licence payers.
Indeed. Obviously, the culture at the BBC for many years has been I think a culture of complacency because of the irregularity with which those billions pour into their coffers. Worth noting, and you mentioned a sort of shareholder element for us citizens that invest in the BBC. BBC Worldwide, very profitable. So perhaps what we need is a little bit more free market economics within the BBC organisation so that perhaps in time it'll pay for itself or go some way towards doing that.
Well, I think that makes sense because if you don't have some sort of demand-driven motivation, then you lose your viewers. You've got to appeal to people, not only in terms of financially, but also in terms of what they want to watch or listen to. And if you forget that market element, then you will fail, and that's what we're seeing at the moment.
Now, of course, I know, Bill, that you are an advocate of the rule of law. What's your view about some of our very feisty pensioners? All the pensioners I know are definitely very feisty. There's a suggestion of a disruptive approach to this new demand, such as urging all over 60s to cancel their TV licence direct debits in solidarity with the over 75s to create a bureaucratic quagmire, backdated checks, offers to pay monthly, basically shoving a big spanner in the works. What do you feel about any action that the public may take?
Well, I think you were right to hint at the beginning that all these activities should be lawful. And it is, to my mind, still wrong that it is a criminal offence, not a civil offence, to not pay your licence. But that is what the law says. And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to be absolutely crystal clear. You must obey the law. So all these protests, I think, are innovative. Ingenuity is a great weapon in. And if people decide to make life a little bit less comfortable for the BBC licence fee collectors, well, good luck to them. It's our money as taxpayers, it's our hard-earned cash, and they're not refusing to pay, they're just not going to be taken for granted. And in a way, that's the right kind of way of protesting. It's peaceful, it's legal, and it's still a nuisance, but it's not spiteful.
Yeah, take on the pensioners because at your peril, they have.
I agree.
They're very, very smart, and also they have time on their hands. Bill, thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to speaking again. Bill Wiggin, Conservative MP for North Herefordshire, who is generally supportive of any lawful action when it comes to protesting this outrageous law that's kicked in, which forces over 75s to pay the licence fee in the middle of a pandemic.